"I was never loved," the young woman said. The cowboy took her away with him. Emily grew up in a small, quiet town that seemed frozen in time. The streets were lined with modest houses, each with a small garden, and children played outside in the late afternoon sun. Yet for Emily, the world always felt distant, almost as if she were looking at it through a glass window. Her childhood was quiet, but not in a peaceful way. There was a constant emptiness in her home. Her parents were polite enough, but they rarely showed warmth or affection. They worked hard, and she often understood that their time and attention were limited. Still, the lack of love left a hollow feeling in her chest, one she carried even into her teenage years. Emily tried to blend in at school. She spoke softly in class and often kept to herself, avoiding conflict but also missing out on friendships. Other kids noticed her quietness and often overlooked her, assuming she didn't care about anything or that she was too shy to make friends. Deep inside, she cared about everything. Her heart felt too much at times, but she had learned that showing emotions rarely brought comfort. It was safer to stay small, to stay invisible. Even as a child, Emily had discovered her safe places, those corners of the world where no one could hurt her. There was a small river that ran along the edge of town, its waters clear and gentle. She would sit on the bank for hours, watching the water ripple and listening to the soft wind in the trees. Sometimes she talked to the river, as though it could understand her feelings better than any human ever could. She shared her hopes and fears with the river, and even if it could not answer, it made her feel a little less alone. Emily also loved to walk in the fields beyond her home. The grass would sway in the wind like waves, and wildflowers painted the earth with colors of yellow, purple, and white. Here, she could breathe freely and forget, even for a while, the coldness she felt at home. She imagined a life that was bigger than her small town, a life filled with adventure, laughter, and someone who truly cared for her. She had no one to tell these thoughts to, so she whispered them to the sky, hoping that maybe, just maybe, the world would hear. Despite the loneliness, Emily was resilient. She learned to find beauty in small things, a bird perched on a branch, the way the morning sun warmed the rooftops, the smell of fresh bread from the town bakery. These small moments were comforting, reminders that life could hold gentle pleasures even when love was scarce. But as the years passed, the loneliness became a constant companion, a shadow that moved quietly behind her. She began to feel that perhaps she was meant to live without love, that her story would always be one of quiet sadness and longing. It was during one of her walks along the river that Emily first saw him. A figure appeared in the distance, riding a horse with ease and confidence. The man's presence was calm and grounded, as if he belonged in the landscape itself. Emily stopped and watched, curious despite herself. He rode slowly, his gaze scanning the fields and trees, noticing the small details of the world. There was a kindness in his eyes that made her heart stir in a way she had not felt in years. The man was Jacob, a cowboy who traveled from town to town. He carried nothing more than the clothes on his back, a saddlebag on his horse, and a gentle curiosity about the people he met along the way. He had spent years on the road, learning the ways of the land and the quiet truths of human nature. He understood hardship, loneliness, and the silent pain of being overlooked. When his eyes met Emily's, he did not look away or judge her silence. Instead, he offered a nod and a soft smile, simple gestures that spoke more than words ever could. For Emily, this encounter was unlike anything she had experienced before. The sight of Jacob riding through the fields brought a spark of wonder, a feeling she had thought was long gone. She found herself returning to the river at the same time each day, hoping to see him again. At first, it was just a glance, a shared moment of acknowledgement. But slowly, over days and weeks, he began to speak to her. His voice was calm, steady, and comforting, like the gentle rhythm of the river she loved. He asked about the fields, about the sky, about life beyond the town. And when Emily spoke, he listened, not just to her words but to the feelings behind them. Emily felt a shift within herself. For the first time, someone truly noticed her. Someone made her feel as if her thoughts and dreams mattered. She found herself talking about small things she had never shared with anyone before. The way the sunlight felt on her skin, the way she loved to watch the clouds move, the secret hopes she held for her future. And Jacob listened patiently, never rushing her, never interrupting, never judging. It was a kind of connection she had never known, and it filled her with a cautious but growing hope. At home, nothing changed. Her parents remained distant, unaware of the quiet transformations happening in their daughter's heart. But Emily felt a strength growing within her, a sense that maybe life could offer more than she had ever dared to imagine. The world outside her small town no longer seemed so distant, and the shadow of loneliness began to lift, if only slightly. She still felt the ache of the years without love, but now there was a possibility that things could be different. Jacob's presence was a mystery and a comfort. He seemed to belong to a world larger than the small town, yet he made her feel that she belonged to it too. Each meeting brought new stories and gentle laughter, small moments that wove a thread of trust and curiosity between them. Emily began to understand that sometimes people come into your life not to fix your pain immediately, but to show you that you are worth caring for, that your heart deserves attention, and that love can grow quietly, patiently over time. As the days passed, Emily began to notice the small changes in herself. She walked taller, spoke a little more confidently, and allowed herself to hope. The river was no longer her only confidant, and the fields were no longer just a place to escape. She had found a companion in Jacob, a person who, without words, showed her that the world could hold kindness and understanding. Though Emily still carried the weight of her past, she also carried a new feeling, possibility. She began to imagine a life beyond the lonely streets of her town, a life where someone could see her, hear her, and care for her. And though the journey was just beginning, she knew that something important had already begun to change, something that might finally bring her the love she had always thought was impossible. And so, Emily's life, which had once felt so small and empty, started to expand in ways she had never expected. The world became less frightening, less lonely, and more filled with quiet hope. She had discovered that even in the midst of a life without love, moments of connection could appear, like a gentle sunrise after a long, dark night. And that first glimpse of a cowboy riding through the fields had opened a door to a future she had never dared to dream of, one where she could finally belong, finally be seen, and maybe, finally be loved. After that first encounter by the river, Emily found herself thinking about the cowboy more than she expected. His presence lingered in her mind, like a gentle melody she couldn't forget. She began to notice the small details about him, the way he moved with quiet confidence, the care he showed toward his horse, and the kindness in his eyes. Jacob, too, seemed to take note of her. Though he rarely spoke of himself, there was a patience in him that made Emily feel safe in a way she had never felt with anyone else. Over the next few days, Emily returned to the river at the same time, hoping to see him again. At first, their conversations were simple. Jacob asked about the river, the weather, and the town. Emily replied cautiously at first, unsure if she could truly trust this stranger. But Jacob's calm demeanor made it easier to open up, little by little. He never pressured her to speak. He only listened and encouraged her gently when she did. As they spent more time together, Emily began to share things she had never told anyone. She spoke of her childhood, the quiet house that felt empty, and the way she often felt invisible even in her own home. She spoke with a mix of sadness and courage, recounting memories that had made her believe she was unworthy of love. Jacob did not interrupt or judge. He simply listened, nodding occasionally, offering words of understanding when needed. Jacob, on his part, shared stories of his own life, but only the kind that taught lessons without boasting. He spoke of long rides across open plains, of the simple pleasures of mornings spent with his horse, and of towns where he had learned that kindness could appear unexpectedly. He explained how life on the road had taught him to notice the small things, to understand that everyone carries a hidden story, and that sometimes the most meaningful connections appear quietly, without warning. Emily was fascinated. She had never met someone who truly seemed to understand the weight of unspoken pain, the ache of wanting to belong, and the hope for a better life. With Jacob, she could speak without fear of being laughed at or dismissed. She began to see him as a mirror to her own longing, a person who recognized her loneliness and treated it with respect. And in his company, her own heart began to soften, allowing herself to hope that perhaps not everyone in the world was cold or uncaring. As the days turned into weeks, their bond deepened. Emily noticed that her walks to the river were no longer just escapes. They were opportunities to see Jacob, to talk, and to share moments of quiet laughter. They explored the fields together, watching the sunlight dance on the grass and listening to the wind rustle through the trees. Emily taught Jacob about the little joys she found in her town, the smell of freshly baked bread from the bakery, the sound of birds in the morning, and the way the river reflected the sky. Jacob, in turn, shared stories of distant towns, of starlit nights on the open road, and of the freedom that came from living simply and truly. Through these shared experiences, Emily began to feel a shift within herself. The heaviness that had always rested on her shoulders started to lift, replaced by a sense of connection she had never known. She realized that her past, though painful, did not define her entirely. There was room for new experiences, for joy, and for trust. And for the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to imagine a life that was different from the one she had always thought she deserved. Jacob also noticed the changes in Emily. He saw the way her eyes sparkled when she spoke of things she loved, how her laughter had grown lighter, and how she began to stand a little taller, as if carrying herself with newfound confidence. He admired her quiet strength and the resilience that had allowed her to endure years of loneliness. To him, she was not fragile or broken. She was someone who had survived the harshness of neglect and had emerged with a gentle heart still capable of hope. One afternoon, as they walked along the edge of the fields, Jacob paused and looked at Emily seriously. "You know," he said softly, "sometimes the world doesn't show people love in the ways they expect, but that doesn't mean love isn't out there. Sometimes it comes quietly, like a river flowing or the sun rising. You just have to be willing to see it when it arrives." Emily listened carefully. His words resonated deeply, touching something inside her she had long thought dormant. She had always believed that love was something loud and obvious, something people gave freely without conditions. But Jacob's words made her realize that love could also be gentle, patient, and quiet, just like the way he treated her. Their conversations grew deeper over time. Emily began to talk about her dreams, things she had never shared with anyone before. She spoke of wanting to travel, to experience the world beyond the small town, and to find a life filled with kindness and understanding. Jacob encouraged her gently, telling her that dreams are often achieved one step at a time, and that sometimes the journey is more important than the destination. Emily also began to confide in Jacob about her fears. She admitted that she was scared of leaving the town, scared of change, and scared that happiness might be fleeting. Jacob did not dismiss her fears. Instead, he acknowledged them, showing her that it was natural to feel uncertain when faced with the unknown. "Fear doesn't mean you're weak," he told her one evening. "It means you're human. The important thing is to take the step anyway, even when it's scary." As their friendship grew, Emily noticed small acts of care from Jacob that spoke volumes. He would notice when she was tired and suggest resting, offer her warm drinks during cool evenings, or simply walk silently by her side when words were unnecessary. These gestures, though simple, made Emily feel valued and seen. They taught her that love was not always about grand declarations. It could be found in consistent, gentle attention and thoughtfulness. Emily's parents remained distant, unaware of the quiet transformation taking place in their daughter. Yet Emily did not feel lonely in the same way anymore. She had found a companion who saw her, who valued her thoughts and feelings, and who respected her as an individual. This new relationship began to change how she viewed herself. She realized that she had worth, that her voice mattered, and that she could be loved, even if it had not been given to her freely in the past. One day, as they rested under a large oak tree, Emily looked at Jacob and felt a surge of gratitude. She had never imagined that a simple encounter could lead to such a profound change in her life. She felt safe, understood, and connected in a way she had never experienced before. The river, the fields, and the quiet town had all been her world for so long, but now she saw that there was something larger, something promising, waiting beyond her familiar surroundings. Jacob noticed the thoughtful look on her face and smiled gently. "You're stronger than you think," he said. "Sometimes it just takes the right person to remind you of that." Emily nodded, feeling the truth in his words. She understood that she did not need to have everything figured out or to have a perfect past to deserve happiness. She only needed to be open to the possibilities that life could offer. Their bond continued to deepen as the days passed. Emily learned to laugh more freely, to trust more easily, and to see beauty in ordinary moments. Jacob, in turn, found joy in Emily's perspective on the world, her quiet observations and her gentle heart. Together, they discovered that friendship, understanding, and compassion could be as powerful as any grand adventure. Emily's hope began to grow. She realized that her life did not have to be defined by the loneliness of her past. There were people in the world who could value her, who could see her worth, and who could offer kindness without expectation. And though the road ahead was uncertain, she felt a sense of possibility, a feeling that life might finally have something beautiful in store for her. By the end of the part, Emily's world had changed subtly but profoundly. The loneliness that had shaped her entire life was no longer absolute. There was laughter, companionship, and a quiet understanding that she had never experienced before. Jacob had not only entered her life. He had begun to show her that love, patience, and care could exist in the world, even when it seemed impossible. And for Emily, that was enough to begin believing that her story could change, that her heart could heal, and that perhaps, for the first time, she could truly hope for happiness. Time passed slowly but meaningfully as Emily and Jacob continued to spend their days together. Their connection had grown from casual conversations into something much deeper. Emily began to realize that her feelings for Jacob were changing. He was no longer just a friendly presence in her life. He had become someone she depended on emotionally. She felt safe with him, seen by him, and slowly the walls she had built around her heart began to crumble. One crisp morning they walked along the edge of a quiet field. The grass glimmered with dew and birds flitted between the trees, singing their morning songs. Emily paused for a moment, taking in the beauty around her, and then turned to Jacob. "Do you ever think about home?" she asked softly. Jacob looked at her with thoughtful eyes. "Sometimes," he said, "but my home has always been wherever I feel I belong. And right now, I feel I belong here with you." Emily's heart skipped a beat. His words were not rushed or dramatic. They were calm, steady, and true. For the first time, she felt that someone was speaking directly to the part of her that had always been lonely. Someone was acknowledging her, not judging her past or her fears, but simply offering acceptance. She felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. It was strange and wonderful to feel this kind of trust and understanding. As days turned into weeks, Emily found herself sharing more of her past with Jacob. She spoke of the quiet nights in her childhood when she had wished for love and warmth that never came. She told him about moments when she had felt invisible at school, unnoticed and misunderstood. Each story brought a small tremor of pain, but Jacob's steady presence made it easier to speak. He listened without interrupting, offering comfort not through words alone, but through the simple act of being there. Jacob, too, began to share more of his life. He spoke of towns he had visited, of long nights under star-filled skies, and of the lessons he had learned on the road. He told Emily that life was not always easy, that hardship was inevitable, but that resilience and kindness could make the journey worthwhile. He explained how he had learned to notice the small moments of beauty and connection, even when life seemed harsh. Emily listened, captivated not only by his stories but by the way he saw the world, a perspective that was full of hope and understanding. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills and painted the sky in shades of gold and pink, Emily felt a mix of fear and hope stirring in her chest. She realized that she had begun to imagine a future beyond her small town, a life that included Jacob. But with this realization came uncertainty. What if she left and things went wrong? What if happiness was only temporary? She had been hurt before, and the thought of disappointment made her hesitate. Jacob sensed her unease. He took her hand gently, his fingers warm and reassuring. "I know it's scary," he said softly. "Leaving everything behind is never easy, but sometimes the things that scare us the most are also the things that can change our lives for the better. You deserve a chance to be happy, Emily. You've carried so much for so long, and you don't have to carry it alone anymore." Her eyes filled with tears. She had spent years believing she would never be loved, that her life would always be quiet and empty. And now, here was someone offering not only companionship, but also a life that could be filled with care, understanding, and possibility. She looked at Jacob, at the sincerity in his eyes, and felt a spark of courage she had never known she possessed. Over the next few days, Emily wrestled with her feelings. She walked through the fields alone, thinking about the life she had always imagined and the life Jacob was offering. She remembered the lonely nights, the quiet streets of her town, and the emptiness she had grown used to. And she compared them to the moments she had spent with Jacob, the laughter, the gentle understanding, the feeling of being truly seen. The choice became clear, even if it frightened her. One afternoon, Jacob found her sitting by the river, staring at the water as it flowed gently past. He sat beside her in silence, letting her thoughts settle. After a while, Emily spoke, her voice trembling slightly. "I don't know if I can leave everything behind," she admitted. "I'm scared." Jacob nodded, understanding. "It's okay to be scared," he said. "It means this matters to you, but think about this. What do you want your story to be? Do you want it to be about fear and what-ifs, or do you want it to be about courage and taking a chance for something better?" Emily considered his words carefully. For years, fear had been her constant companion, whispering that she was worthy, that love wasn't meant for her. But Jacob's words challenged that fear. They made her see that courage was not the absence of fear, but the choice to move forward despite it. And for the first time in her life, she allowed herself to believe that happiness was possible. That evening, as the sky turned a deep shade of purple and the first stars appeared, Emily made her decision. She would leave the town and go with Jacob. It was not a decision made lightly or impulsively. It was the result of reflection, hope, and the recognition that she deserved more than a life defined by loneliness. She turned to Jacob, her eyes steady and filled with determination. "I want to go with you," she said. "I want to see what life can be like beyond here." Jacob smiled gently, not with triumph but with quiet understanding. "I'm glad," he said. "And remember, Emily, this is not about running away. It's about moving towards something better. We'll face challenges, yes, but we'll do it together. And most importantly, you'll never have to feel unloved again." The next morning, they prepared for the journey. Emily packed a small bag with essentials, choosing items that were practical yet held sentimental value. She took a deep breath as she looked around her childhood home, knowing that she was leaving behind not only physical spaces, but also the patterns of loneliness and neglect that had shaped her life. She felt a mix of fear, excitement, and relief. As she mounted the horse beside Jacob, she felt a sense of freedom she had never known. The wind brushed against her face, the field stretched endlessly ahead, and the world seemed suddenly full of possibilities. She realized that this journey was more than a change of place. It was a symbolic step toward healing, trust, and a life filled with love. During the ride, Jacob spoke softly about the road ahead. He explained that life would not always be easy, that challenges would come, but that they could face them together. Emily listened, feeling comforted by his words and reassured by his steady presence. For the first time, she felt that she had a companion who would not abandon her, someone who valued her not for what she could do, but simply for who she was. Along the way, Emily noticed the small joys of the journey. She watched the sunrise over open plains, listened to the gentle sound of the horse's hooves on the ground, and felt the warmth of the sun on her skin. She marveled at the beauty of the world outside her small town, realizing that life could be vast, bright, and full of surprises. Each mile traveled was not just physical distance but a journey into a new chapter of her life, one where she could finally experience care, trust, and love. By the time evening fell, Emily felt a sense of peace she had never known. The fear that had once dominated her life was still present, but it was accompanied by hope and courage. She looked at Jacob, grateful for his patience, understanding, and unwavering support. She realized that the love she had longed for all her life was not something to be demanded or rushed. It was something that could grow naturally when given space, trust, and care. That night, they camped under a sky full of stars. Emily sat by the fire, feeling the warmth not only from the flames but from the knowledge that she was taking control of her life. She had made a choice to step away from fear and loneliness, and in doing so, she had opened herself to the possibility of true happiness. Jacob sat beside her, quietly tending to the fire, his presence steady and reassuring. Emily felt a deep sense of gratitude, understanding that she had found not just a companion, but someone who could help her heal and grow. By the end of this part of their journey, Emily's life had transformed in ways she had never imagined. She had confronted her fear, embraced courage, and chosen a path that promised love, trust, and understanding. The ride with Jacob was more than a physical journey. It was a symbolic passage from a life of solitude to one of connection and hope. And as Emily drifted to sleep under the stars, she felt for the first time that the words she had spoken so long ago, "I was never loved," might no longer define her story. The days after leaving her small town were a mix of wonder, learning, and quiet reflection for Emily. Every mile she traveled with Jacob opened her eyes to the vastness of the world, a world she had only imagined in her dreams while sitting alone by the river. The open plains stretched endlessly, dotted with fields of green and wildflowers that swayed in the gentle wind. Each new sunrise brought a sense of hope, a feeling she had never experienced in the quiet emptiness of her childhood home. Emily quickly discovered that life on the road was not just about freedom, it was about responsibility and learning to adapt. Jacob taught her how to care for their horses, how to pack efficiently for long journeys, and how to notice the small details in nature that often go unnoticed. The way clouds moved across the sky, the patterns of bird flights, and the subtle changes in the air that signaled approaching weather. Emily listened and learned eagerly, finding satisfaction in each new skill she acquired. The sense of accomplishment brought a quiet confidence she had never felt before. They traveled through small towns and quiet villages, and Emily began to notice the differences in people's lives. She saw families gathering in the evenings, friends laughing in town squares, and strangers offering kindness to one another. These simple moments fascinated her because she had grown up without much warmth or attention. Seeing the world through Jacob's eyes helped her realize that life could be full of connection, and that her past experiences did not dictate her future. She began to hope, not just for herself, but for the chance to be part of a world that could offer care and understanding. During these travels, Emily learned about the rhythm of life outside the predictable confines of her town. She began to rise early, greet the day with energy, and take part in daily chores alongside Jacob. She learned to prepare meals over a small campfire, to care for their animals, and to navigate the open landscapes with confidence. Each task, though simple, carried a sense of purpose. Emily felt a satisfaction that she had never known in her previous life, a feeling that came from being actively engaged in the world and contributing to their shared journey. Jacob, too, noticed how Emily was growing into herself. He admired the way she approached challenges with determination and patience. When mistakes were made, as they sometimes were, he did not scold or criticize. Instead, he guided her gently, allowing her to learn through experience. Emily began to realize that this was another form of love, support that encouraged growth without judgment, patience that allowed mistakes without shame, and companionship that celebrated effort rather than perfection. As days turned into weeks, Emily's sense of self continued to strengthen. The young woman who had once thought she was unworthy of attention began to understand that she had value. Jacob's quiet confidence in her abilities encouraged her to trust herself, to make decisions without fear, and to believe in her own strength. For the first time, she felt that she could shape her own life, rather than simply reacting to the neglect and indifference she had grown up with. Despite the freedom and excitement, Emily's journey was not without challenges. There were long days when the sun beat down harshly, when the wind chilled to the bone, or when the horses needed extra care after difficult terrain. There were moments when the open road felt lonely, and Emily's fears from her past would quietly resurface. But each time, Jacob's calm presence reminded her that challenges were part of life, and that facing them together made them easier to overcome. Emily began to see that resilience was not something one was born with, but something one built through experience, support, and courage. Evenings brought moments of reflection and closeness. As they sat by the fire under a sky filled with stars, Emily and Jacob shared stories, dreams, and hopes for the future. These quiet nights became sacred to her, times when she felt fully alive, fully present, and fully seen. She spoke of the life she had left behind, not with regret, but with a new understanding of its role in shaping her resilience. And Jacob, in turn, shared lessons from his travels, teaching her that every experience, good or bad, held meaning and could guide her toward a more thoughtful, fulfilled life. Emily noticed the small ways Jacob showed his care for her every day. He would ensure she was comfortable, share food, offer guidance, and protect her from harm. These actions, simple as they seemed, carried a weight far beyond words. They demonstrated a kind of love that was steady, unwavering, and unassuming, a love that did not demand, did not rush, and did not judge. Emily began to understand that this was the kind of love she had longed for, the kind that could heal old wounds and bring a sense of security she had never known before. Their travels also brought opportunities for Emily to meet new people and see the world from different perspectives. In small towns, she observed families, farmers, and workers living lives full of routine, yet enriched with connection. She noticed how people cared for one another, shared stories, and offered help without expectation. Each encounter reinforced the lessons she was learning with Jacob, that life could be kind, that love could exist even in simple gestures, and that her past did not define her worth. Emily also began to discover a sense of independence she had never experienced before. She learned to navigate challenges without fear, to speak her mind, and to take initiative when needed. With Jacob by her side, she felt supported, but she also felt empowered to act on her own. Each decision she made, each small success she achieved, added to her confidence and self-respect. She began to realize that love and support did not diminish her autonomy. Instead, they enhanced it, providing a foundation on which she could build a life of her own making. As the months passed, Emily's bond with Jacob deepened into a profound companionship. It was a love that was quiet yet undeniable, built on trust, understanding, and shared experience. They were not perfect. Disagreements arose, and challenges tested their patience. But each challenge strengthened their bond, teaching them the importance of communication, compromise, and empathy. Emily realized that love was not about grand gestures alone, but about consistency, care, and the willingness to face life's difficulties together. One evening, as they watched the sunset over a distant hill, Emily reflected on her journey. She thought about the years she had spent feeling unloved and overlooked, and she realized how far she had come. She had left behind fear, loneliness, and doubt, and in their place, she had found courage, companionship, and the quiet certainty of being valued. The young woman who had once whispered to the river about dreams of love now felt those dreams coming true in ways she had never imagined. Jacob noticed her thoughtful expression and gently took her hand. "You've changed," he said softly. "Not because I told you to, but because you found the strength inside yourself. And that strength is what makes you so remarkable." Emily smiled, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. For the first time in her life, she believed that she was worthy of love, respect, and happiness, not because anyone had promised it to her, but because she had earned it through courage, patience, and openness. Life continued in this rhythm, traveling, learning, and growing together. Emily began to see the beauty in small moments, the significance of shared experiences, and the power of trust. She realized that love was not about perfect circumstances or grand gestures. It was about being present, showing care, and honoring one another's journey. Each day with Jacob reinforced this truth, and Emily felt a peace she had never known before. By the end of their travels, Emily had transformed from a young woman defined by loneliness into someone confident, capable, and loved. She understood that her past had shaped her, but it did not control her. She had chosen to leave fear behind, to embrace trust, and to step into a life that held hope, joy, and meaningful connection. Jacob had not only taken her away from her old life, he had guided her toward healing, self-discovery, and the quiet, steadfast love she had always longed for. One evening, as they camped beneath a sky filled with stars, Emily looked at Jacob with gratitude and wonder. "I never thought I could feel this alive," she whispered. Jacob smiled, taking her hand gently. "And this is only the beginning," he said. "Life will continue to bring challenges, but we face them together. And most importantly, you'll never be unloved again." Emily leaned back, feeling the warmth of the fire and the steady presence of Jacob beside her. She realized that her story had changed in ways she could never have imagined. The loneliness that had defined her early life had been replaced by trust, companionship, and hope. The journey with Jacob had taught her that love could arrive quietly, patiently, and without conditions, and that the strength to embrace it had always been within her. As she closed her eyes that night, Emily felt a sense of peace that was profound and enduring. She knew that the road ahead would continue to hold surprises, but she also knew that she had found a place in the world where she belonged. The young woman who had once said, "I was never loved," now understood that love could be found in the quiet, steadfast presence of someone who truly sees you. And with Jacob by her side, she knew that she would never feel unloved again. Her life, once small and confined by fear, had expanded into something vast, beautiful, and full of possibility. Emily had discovered that the world was capable of offering care, trust, and affection, and that she had the strength to embrace it. The journey with the cowboy had not only taken her to new places, but had also taken her deep into her own heart, teaching her that love is real, enduring, and transformative when it is given freely and received openly. And so, Emily's story ended not with loneliness or sorrow, but with hope, trust, and the quiet certainty that she had finally found the love she had always longed for, a love that was patient, steadfast, and true.